Hello everyone, my name is Joshua. This is the 45th video of my video journal series. Today's date is Wednesday, the 25th of March 2026. And something I guess I wanted to talk about today was my day. I'll start off with my day because this is a video journal series. Yeah, my day's been good. I went to school, I did a lot of work, studying, essay writing. I have a lot of homework, not because I left it to the last minute, because I had just have a lot of readings for my subjects, and by Friday, which is in around 2 days' time, recording this, I would have needed to complete 15 pages plus an article left. That's all I have left. Um, just for the, I guess, study side of things, I still got an assessment that's due on Friday. So on top of that, 15 pages, an article, which is, quite short. It's, nothing really that hard. And then I just got to, finish off one of my essays, one of my assessments that's due on Friday. And with the essay, look, I'm like 80% done with it, like closing in on 85%. All I got to do is like the last paragraph or last main section of it, and then intro and conclusion, which is basically around 500-600 words ish, which I can do in around 1 or 2 days. So yeah, tomorrow I really gotta like lock in and get the rest of that done. And I guess that just forms what I'm just about to say next, which is I guess I'll be talking about my experience of lateness, being late. Now, I haven't left an assignment overdue in ages. In fact, I rarely leave assignments overdue. Usually, I have like a little chunk left right before the due date, but I usually, um, you know, work on that pretty easily. I don't leave like half the assignment due the night before, sort of thing. I used to do that, which was a terrible, terrible habit, but now I just leave, a little bit of work, a little bit of revision or editing to do right before an assignment's due, just so then I can look through the piece one last time. And, I just hate, submitting assessments late. I hate being late towards things. If I, need to be somewhere, I'll always be about like 5 or 10 minutes early, sometimes even earlier, depending on the, I guess, importance of the event. Because when you're late, you just start stressing out. You got a bunch of things running around in your mind. You can't really like settle in. With assessments, like you can leave, I guess, a little bit to like the last day wouldn't really matter. But if you leave like more than I'll say a quarter or a half, depending on what you're doing, it is kind of like concerning in that aspect, in that viewpoint. Um, and I'm lucky that tomorrow, is a day off for me. I can just like work and work and work and get it done within around all my work that I have to do. I can most probably get it done and dusted around 4 hours ish, maybe 4 hours of like intense, I guess, work, or intense in my aspect where you're working, being take a 5 minute break and you work. It takes me a long time to complete things, and that's why I like to start things off early. In fact, the assignments that's due on Friday, I've been working on for quite a while, around 2 weeks. And just a bit each day, just like writing a bit, changing up my ideas, my drafts, and all that. And, I kind of like that. I kind of like just slowly working on an assignment because you kind of like develop a bond with that assignment, that you can't really get if you hand in assignments late. When you're doing stuff early, and you just do a bit each day, you grow like a sense of, I guess, pride in that assignment. You grow like a sense of attachment. You can't really get that with handing the assignment late because you're pretty much rushing. It's not going to be the best work you're ever going to do. Um, and I know it's a university or high school stereotype that you leave your work to like the last minute, but for me, I used to do that a lot up until around year 11, and I'm pretty sure I told you. I think I might have said this on the channel that one day I left a homework assignment. a little bit overdue, and I had to like rush it, and it wasn't the proudest thing that I did. So from that day forth, I made a pledge that I was never going to be late with anything, and I've so far succeeded. Even then, like even if I might have to rush a little bit towards the end, it will only be like that little instead of the whole assignment. And when it comes to something like a job interview, for instance, you do not want to be late. Being late will be a very, very bad thing. It will set a very bad standard for your employer or potential employer. Sorry. Um, you know, and I guess when it comes to stuff like reservations, flights, if you're late, they always do like those boarding calls, like boarding call for Joshua, and then you just like embarrass yourself in front of the whole airport. And I'm like, where are these people? All right, they're clearly in the airport, unless they rush through security like at the last minute. But they're always taken on those like mini buggies to like the airport terminal or like the specific gate. And I remember when I was flying home, from New Zealand to Australia, and I witnessed that. They were like, these airport crews on these like buggies, and they're like lifting the people to their gate because they were catching a flight before me in that gate, and they're like, oh, thank God we made it. But I'm like, in my head, where were you? When they were calling out, yeah, this is a Qantas flight 69 to Sydney or Perth or whatever. I'm like, why don't you listen to those announcements? Where were you? In the bathroom taking, I don't know, your business, your time, reading the newspaper on the loo? What are you doing? Like, it's just like they do multiple announcements, right? They do like 20 or so announcements before they like give up or they like the plane takes off, and I can understand, maybe your alarm didn't go off and you're like rushing towards the airport. But if you're like pass through security and you're just like in airport shops, there's no reason for you to be like late. Come on. It's not that big of a walk, like 10 minutes to the gate. And I always have a rule of thumb whenever I'm at an airport, for international flights, I'm physically at the airport 4 hours early in some instances. Usually it's 3 or 4 hours, but on the safe side, I always pick 4 hours. Now that seems a little overkill, but with me, um, I catch public transport a lot. I don't really take taxis or cars or anything like that. And I know public transport can be delayed and packed, and stuff can happen. Like delays and potholes or the bus breaks down. And when I was in New Zealand, you had to catch a bus to the airport. So I anticipated all of those things. Luckily, nothing bad happened. Everything went as smoothly. But you know, when you only have like one bus route that goes to the airport or one train route, you really got to like prep ahead, sort of thing, and just anticipate for the worst. And it allows you to check in. You just get something to eat at the airport, sit down. Meanwhile, if you're late, you know, if you realize, oh crap, I got a flight to catch in an hour, I'm not even at the airport. That's it. You're just panicking. You're getting in the cab, and you gotta go through airport security, those lines, and usually the check-in counter closes like I'm pretty sure it's like an hour before a flight, around then, depending on which airline you choose and if it's domestic or international. But yeah, um, usually the check-in counter closes before the flight itself, and you know that I guess that's the reason why I don't like being late. I never been late towards a flight or anything. My parents were always like the first ones out of the door. That meme where it's like, "We got a flight in 12 hours, son. You gotta wake up." That's literally me. I'm afraid to admit it, but you know, I always have like just that instinct. Just that little part of my brain where I just panic if I'm like, think I'm gonna be late towards something. Um, and from late assignments to, I guess, being late towards like a job interview or something like that, it really just sucks. And I don't understand, like, when my friends say, oh yeah, we'll just rock up to this place, a little bit late. I'm like, why are you gonna rock up to a place a little bit late, Like maybe for a friend's birthday party, you can come like 5, 10, 30 minutes late. It's a very informal thing, but I guess if you're like meeting up, wouldn't you say, all right, 5 o'clock at Central Station? Why do you just like come up at like 5:30 just because you felt like it? Not because there was like an event or delays or whatever, but because you just like said, 5:30. Make it a definitive thing. Everyone is physically at that location at 5 o'clock. All right, you know, if everyone can't make it by 5, then move it to 6. All right, I don't care. 5, 6, 6:30, 7 o'clock. I do not care. All right, if we have to move it back a little bit later. I just want a time where everyone is physically there, just so then we don't say 6 o'clock, but then people show up at 6:15, but we're already left because we didn't know they were coming or they didn't reply to us. I think that's a good thing. Just like you don't have to set something extremely, extremely early, but just set something in like a reasonable time and just say, hey, we need everyone physically here at like 7 o'clock, for instance, p.m. or 6 o'clock p.m. or whatever time you set. So then, people arrive there early. And I remember on school field trips, they always say like meet here at like 9 o'clock, but there always be like that one or two guys who like run late. Some of them for valid reasons, but other ones because like, oh, I overslept, sir. But I'm like, come on, I set 2 alarms. Why should I have to suffer? So then we all have to wait for you, basically, sort of thing. And that's another thing about being late. Other people have to wait for you, which is, I guess, why I'm so against being late because I hate other people waiting for me. And I'm just checking to see if this video is recording. Yes, it is. All right. The reason I'm checking why my camera's recording is because I remember for one of my video journal entries, I did a whole spiel, did a whole entry. I forgot which number it was or which day it was, or what I was talking about. But then I looked at my camera and realized it wasn't recording. So those are like, I guess, the lost tapes, sort of. Um, I went on for like around 10, 15 minutes and realized I wasn't recording, but I said a lot of good stuff, I remember. So yeah, I always try and peek to see if I'm recording because I don't know. I guess that's another thing in me. Like I'm always checking to do if I do every single thing right. I'm always paranoid that I get the little errors wrong. That I forget to record or my fly's undone. I'm pretty sure I recorded one video journal series when my fly was undone, but just because it was like folded up like this, you couldn't really see it. But I remember like ending the recording and just seeing the zipper down, which I was like, oh my god, what if that just shows on camera? But luckily it didn't, so whatever. Really off track, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, I just hate being late towards stuff. I've been late numerous times in my life, but it's been slowly dwindling over the years. Um, I agree with the notion that being on time is essentially being late. Because if you're right on time with something, you're technically in the gray area. But I always like to call it late, sort of. Because sometimes a group might get like a minute or two early start, and if you just arrive just on time, you're really, I guess, pushing it. Yet again, it depends, if it's a birthday party, who cares? But if it's like a job interview and you show up like right on the dot, if it's a job interview at 12 o'clock and you show up right at 12, it might be in that gray area. My best piece of advice is just 5 minutes early, You don't even have to be 10 or 15 minutes early to like a job interview. I recommend it, but, at the very, very minimum, be 5 minutes early to a job interview. I guess the earlier you go to a job interview, like the more dedication you show, sort of thing. But if you arrive up like an hour early, you gotta like, I guess, creep some people out, sort of. But if you arrive up like half an hour early, I think half an hour early is like a pretty good measure for a job interview. If you show up half an hour early, it's pretty good. 10 to 15 minutes, all right. 5 minutes, just like bare minimum. Because with a job interview, you want to like show up early, just make a good impression. and I guess to end this video off, being late just means stressing out, especially when you're doing assignments. I have a bunch of friends who leave a significant portion of their assignment. Sometimes they don't even start until like a few days prior, and it's like a 2,000 word essay sort of thing. Um, they don't start until like pretty late. But I think the main reason why is procrastination. I already made a whole video on like procrastination, but essentially, you know, one way to avoid being late is just to take the small steps. Sometimes take the slower route if it means you'll be more motivated to do something or get to a place quicker, sort of thing. It sounds pretty weird, but it's like driving to your local train station, right? It takes 5 minutes, but you keep on like holding it off, and then you drive, but you're like a minute late for the train because I guess you like overestimated how much. Oh, sorry, overestimated? No, you gave like an overestimation on how much time you have. Meanwhile, if you walk to the station, you like, all right, walking is slower, so I need to leave earlier, and you have a probability of going to the train station 5 minutes before your train arrives. Meanwhile, if you drive by car, you might be able to get there on time, but then you gotta search for a place to park, and then you gotta, walk from the car park to the station, and you might have already missed the train. So I guess, doing things the slow way, I guess, incentivizes you to get an early start on things, which I actually think is like a better thing, because if you're doing the slow method, then you start incredibly early. Meanwhile, if you're going to do it the fast method, you might like hold that off, or you might be late towards something because you're overconfident. And with that fast method, there's no 100% guarantee that you're not going to face a disruption like a pothole. You missed, um, you know, oh crap, I forgot my wallet at home, sort of thing. Or, what if there's like a crash or minor delay on the road, sort of thing. And, yeah, just, I guess with being late, um, maybe just try to make it a habit to like arrive at things like even 5 minutes early. Um, write things down in your schedule, set multiple alarms, tell someone in your family like wake you up because some of my friends they like sleep in and then they're like, oh crap, I got class today, sort of thing. But then there's like other reasons, like let's say something's popped up and you like have, I guess, an excuse to be like, well, that's understandable. If like public transport strike or whatever, or trains suddenly get cancelled, I can understand. But I guess if it's something like an exam, you have to be in an exam hall in an hour's time, but the trains are down. Some universities and places won't really accept that as like an answer, even though I kind of think it should, because trains are supposed to be reliable transport. If it like breaks down, then I think it should be like a reasonable excuse, in depending on the case, really. But yeah, always just make it a habit. Just go to stuff early as you can. I know people's schedules are different and all that, but it wouldn't hurt arriving at something like 5 minutes early. You know, and I guess in some aspects, sometimes the fastest way isn't the most, I guess, fastest way, quote unquote. You know, do things slower if it means it, like, I guess you get like an early start on things and you like evenly pace out your progress. Like doing an essay over the course of 2 weeks rather than 2 days, sort of thing. You know, because even with, I guess, the 2 week method, even if you're slow and you might not make, I guess, you might not match the same sort of speed as writing, I don't know, 500 words a day juxtaposed to 200 words a day. You still have that momentum. And at the very least, if you leave like, I don't know, a couple of hundred words for like the last 2 days, you can easily like knock it out, sort of thing. But if you leave your entire assignment to the last 2 days, well, that's just kind of bad thing. It really gets you stressed out, and you have to start rushing things. But anyway, um, looks like I'm being late for this video. I've already gone over time because I'm trying to keep these videos a little bit condensed on the weekdays. But yeah, that's just my piece of advice for, I guess, combating lateness and why I don't like being late because it just stresses me out, and I like to take things chill and slow. Anyway, that's all I have to say for today. I guess I'll catch you later. See you next time. Bye. Take care.